every technician has this fear if I tell too much. In other words, the car does have a number of concerns, but if I let them know too much, the price tag gets too high, they'll just decline it all, and I won't get any. It's common, but from a management standpoint, we've got to be conscious of that.
Welcome to Retention Roadmap, navigating service success for new car dealerships. I am delighted to welcome Don Andres to join us today to talk about, amongst other things, his new book, Why Auto Service Departments Fail to Grow, the real reasons why and the simple techniques for consistent growth. Don is the owner and president of Auto SCT Consulting and Training. Don and I have known one another for, I think, 20 years or so. And frankly, I know very few people who have had Don's depth and breadth of experience leading parts and service departments, especially really large service departments. Don has led some just massive organizations and have just led them superbly and brought about some great results for them. So, Don, thanks for joining the podcast today. Tell us what part of the world are you joining us from?
I'm in Dublin, Ohio. Ohio. Yeah. And it's a beautiful day. And Bill, thanks so much for the invitation to come on the podcast and to talk about the book, and then to just talk about issues that are sometimes struggling in the service drive.
Absolutely, thrilled to have you. You talk a lot in your book about process and strategies, and really enjoyed reading it. And one of the themes that I saw, if I could boil it down to one word, was proactivity, being proactive. Especially around making sure service advisors are planning for tomorrow, and your concept of having them own their appointments. So I guess start out by telling us, why'd you write the book and who did you write it for?
That's really interesting because, in all honesty, on the surface, you would think that it's a great service manager book, maybe even a good service advisor book. Hey, you're dealing with some stress in the service drive, and this book can offer some tools to do that. But the reality of it is, in many cases, it's the general manager and sometimes the owner that knows the fixed operations from a numbers side of the business. But in many cases, especially the general managers, that may have come up through the variable side. And so when they walk out in the morning to greet the service manager and maybe say good morning to the staff, what are they really looking at? And in many cases, they just don't know. Yep. So, they're great with the numbers, and they'll talk about the numbers in their meetings. But going in there and seeing the customer engagement, understanding whether they're on their mark today or whether they're hitting their mark as far as engagement with the service advisors, or whether they're off their game. And if the book is really intended to be a great eye opener for them to be able to walk out and see in just a matter of moments. We're not on our game today, and now that's a great time to make those adjustments. And then, is my service manager watching? And that gets into that. I think The premise, really, what you talk about, is never being surprised. If a service advisor is prepared and never surprised by a customer, he's going to have a pretty good day. Right. He knows what to do. They're most service advisors have a lot of talent. They know how to engage customers. We hire people that like customers. But if they constantly end up getting surprised, halfway through the morning, they might be done with customers. They're not engaging at that level that we know is important to build that relationship and that trust, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just anecdotally from my experience, walking into dealership service departments, the thing that really does to me stand out for service advisors who are really successful versus those that are just, generally successful is their preparation. It's those service advisors who really know, I know exactly who's coming in tomorrow. I know what they need. I know what their talking points are. I know that I want to listen to them and make sure that I fully understand their needs. Those are the ones that seem to be, the leaders of the pack, and not only sell a lot, but they do that because they've generated a great relationship with their individual customers. So I think you've hit the nail right on the head there.
I think you're right. If you notice, there isn't too many service drives where, let's say, there's 4 service writers. Invariably, one's just this monster closer. One or two of them are pretty consistent, and then one always struggles. And you say, wait a minute, how does that happen when all 4 engage with the same customers? They have basically the same age and mileage vehicles. Yeah, some of them with some tenure may have some clients that go directly to them, but they build that relationship. But, if at the end of the month, the averages are the averages, right? They both
Right.
probably deal with the same age and mileage vehicles. So why are they not getting the same results can be this level of preparation and level of understanding.
Yep.
And so, again, getting back to this idea of never being surprised, it's never the car issues that throws a monkey wrench into a write-up in the morning. They know how to handle a check engine light. They know how to handle a coolant leak or an oil leak. And, of course, maintenance, they know how to handle that. No, it's the fact that the customer surprises them with what's going on in their busy life during write-up. Hey,
Right.
I can only give you the car for about 4 hours today. I got to come back, or this afternoon I've got to get my daughter or my son to this practice, and so I need the car by this time. Well, the advisor doesn't want to end up upsetting a customer, so what's his first reaction is, well, we're kind of busy. Let me see what I can do, right? And so at that point in time, he's officially decided that he's going to create some chaos in that shop because the shop has a flow, and now suddenly these unrealistic promise times get made, and now suddenly there's disruptions and interruptions with a technician. And so this is this almost chaotic thing that starts out very innocently. But if you can imagine 4 writers writing cars from 7:30 in the morning till now 10:30, 11 o'clock, that's a lot of somewhat chaotic commitments that end up getting made, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I want to go back to what you talked about in terms of your target for the book and targeting, perhaps general managers who really may not have all that much experience with parts and service. I guess in my perception is that most general managers, as they come up through the ranks, are coming up through the variable side for the most part. And is that still true today in your experience?
Yeah. And I mean, this is probably as high as 80-85%.
Yeah.
There are certainly some great service managers in fixed operations that have learned the variable side, but the pressure to move metal, the pressure to keep that inventory turning, to be able to motivate that sales staff, and the turnover that can naturally happen in the sales staff on the variable side,
Right.
both with in the salespeople as well as management, tower managers and F&I. You need someone that has a great understanding as a general manager. So there's probably not wrong in the fact that they come primarily from the variable side. The success stories are easier to tell, but fixed operations at a time right now where interest rates are high and there's a lot of anxiety in the marketplace right now. Now's when a general manager has to have a really, I think, important understanding of how much money is potentially left on the table in their service drive.
Absolutely. Yep.
From this lack of engagement. And of course, that's really what the book is about, is how do we get yeses from customers for additional needed services? You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
So.
Absolutely. So along those lines, I'd like to talk to you about multi-point inspections and the importance of those. And you've got a quote in your book that long-term growth does not happen in a parts and service department until we inspect and measure the quality of the multi-point inspection. And I think you talk in your book about a process you went through with your technicians and advisors where you had like 45 of them inspect the same vehicle and came up with, and I forget what the number is, but like 30 different results. Talk to me a little bit about why the multi-point inspection process is so important, especially as it relates to developing a relationship with that customer so they return again and again.
Yeah, I think, and we see it with advisors, and we definitely can see it with technicians as well. They rely heavily on selling some additional needs and services. If they're strictly doing maintenance, oil changes, or if they're strictly doing the diagnostics and the repair of what the customer brought it in for, that check engine light or that coolant leak, that's a tough way to go. They rely heavily on those additional needed services, and they get that through that multi-point inspection. It's a visual inspection. Technology's come a long way. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish now. In fact, the latest now where an advisor or a technician can take his camera, walk around, and point out some areas of the car. It really adds some credibility. It's a throwback to the 70s when I was writing service and technicians really did engage with the customers. All the way back then. But here's the problem. Every technician has this fear if I tell too much. In other words, the car does have a number of concerns, but if I let them know too much, the price tag gets too high, they'll just decline it all, and I won't get any. It's common, but from a management standpoint, we've got to be conscious of that. When I did that exercise, that we felt that the inconsistency with the quality of the multi-point inspection, and we had 45 technicians in that beautiful Lexus store.
Yeah.
We got 45 different results from a used car that we had bugged with a few things, and it had higher mileage, so they were naturally things that had worn. But we were shocked to know that we got 45 different opinions of what we thought was a good MPI.
Yep.
So that was the beginning of us actually carving out time every day to evaluate the cautions and fails. Fails are easy, right? If it's got an oil leak, you can put an oil leak. But it's this front end components that over time just naturally wear and create play, and drive belts and things of that nature that wear over time, that if breaks would disable a car, yet that technician isn't prolific at it, doesn't do it very often, doesn't like doing suspension components. Whatever the reason might be, they just tend to sometimes overlook certain areas of the car. Don't do it on purpose. They're just human beings. And even with this great technology of the camera and walking around with the phone, they're still just looking at what they believe they want to get accomplished on the car.
Yep.
And yet there's more things that the car needs. So this ability for a service manager as part of his daily routine, and it's not hard, that the technology allows us to see those things pretty fast. But to have that part of his routine to evaluate the cautions and the fails, rewards you with two things. One, customer gets to see everything. And it turns out they appreciate that. Yes, they may not agree to getting all of that done, and we have great strategies to loop the customer back in and get those things done, chip away at that list. But to not tell them, I think, is where money really gets left on the table.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Absolutely. This is a good time for our listeners for me to talk about the fact that we've developed, DriveSure has developed a service retention audit checklist. And number one on that checklist is to review your multi-point inspection process to make sure you're doing the things that you need to do. So this is a comprehensive tool that we developed for a dealership's service process and product offerings that helps them identify and strengthen customer relationships, improve service quality, and increase, obviously, customer loyalty and customer retention. So you can get this over at drivesure.com/resources, or simply drop me a message on LinkedIn or give me a call, and I'll be sure to get you a copy of that. As part of that multi-point inspection process, Don, I've seen, particularly at NADA this past year, I saw a number of companies offering automated inspections, whether that be for tires or the overall vehicle. Just curious in terms of what you think of those, and what you think the impact of those automated inspections could be on bringing about a more consistent inspection.
Yeah, anytime you can add credibility and then have it in an ability to text or to email a customer real-time photographs of real concerns, I think that always adds a lot of credibility. But what we can never do is remove yourself so far that you're not engaging the customer. That in fact, when you're finally asking for that sale, they don't know who you are. They haven't met you yet, and you have to go even farther back. Customers don't know their vehicles that well. They know to change the oil in many cases, and maybe some tires or some brakes, but that's about it. And here's the sad reality: they don't necessarily want to know.
Right.
So where the dealership world always excelled was that they didn't live in the moment like an independent. I'm going to get what I get today, and that's it. I'm going to build a long-time relationship. Why? Because I want to sell them more cars. But in all honesty, I want to build that level of trust, and I can do that through engagement. So technology is great to a point, but along that way, you've got to talk to the customer about what you see, what you're finding out, what's going to happen today. All that's done in that write-up process. I think back when DriveSure was launched in the very beginning, you were one of the first companies to value this idea of measuring tires. We were not in the tire business about the time that you were getting going. And here was this great tool that gave incredible retention tool in the sense that, hey, you got this great coverage, but we are going to measure your tires, and we ended up ultimately measuring your brakes at the same time.
Right.
It forced us into a routine. And so, your foresight to understand that DriveSure was such a value-based initiative where you didn't just get an oil change today, you got all this just for choosing us, I thought was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It got us into that routine then of measuring those things. And you're right.
Right.
Now we want to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Technology is great. I just want to make sure that advisor never stops introducing themselves, let them know what's going to happen today, preparing for that customer so that by the time they get that information on the phone, you go, hey, let's talk about that for just a minute. It's too easy, and I'll finish with this point. It's too easy to say no on a text, just to click the no button or things of that nature. And that's not necessarily that they don't appreciate the fact it needs to be done. They just don't know what it is. So it becomes easier to say no and then check back with their husband, with their dad, with their uncle in the car business, their boyfriend that they don't have, and they're just not sure. So they just initially click no. And then we've lost that sale.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack right there. There's first of all, thanks for your compliments on what we've done with DriveShare, and really, that's just a function of listening to the needs of customers and customers like you back at the time, who were really trying to get into the tire business more because they recognize that tires are a big point of defection, and the reality is that is still true today. We did a 2023 DriveShare service retention survey of 1,400 active service customers of new car dealerships, and we asked them where they went the last time that they needed to purchase a tire, and 2/3 of them went somewhere else, and which is shocking. And then we said, okay, let's drill down a little bit more, and what of the people who did go somewhere else, we asked them, were you aware that your dealership sold tires? And there's still a very high percentage, over 1/3 of customers didn't even know that their dealership sold tires. And to you and me, that's shocking. But again, you have to put ourselves in the customer's shoes, and they're not thinking of their vehicle every day. But there's still just a heck of a lot of opportunity out there for dealers to make sure that customers think of them and think of them first for tires. And that's why that MPI, one of the reasons why that MPI process is so important.
Well, yes, which really leads to the final thing, and that is, what does your active delivery look like?
Yes, I'm glad you got to that. Yeah, because I'm really curious about. I really like for you to discuss that further, because I think it's so incredibly crucial to making sure that you maintain that relationship with the customer and close out that transaction very smoothly.
Yeah, there's so much that happens in a typical visit where we've got that team dialed in. They are literally clicking on all cylinders, and you end up with this quality MPI, and then we fail to really review that sometimes in our active delivery. Here's what happened today. Here's the things that we sent you, and you authorize this. These you want to hold off on, and things of that nature. And it gets back to that same routine. We have so many cars coming in every day that the idea of feeling like we have to stop and do this really good quality active delivery is frustrating when I see that that's where the money is really getting left on the table, right?
Yep.
The car did need it. The customer did appreciate the information, but for example, you interrupted them in the middle of their day, right? They're in the middle of the routine. They get a text, they get an email, or they get a phone call and says, "Here's what we found on the car today, and here's some additional items that we've noticed that I want." The good news is we can try to get those done today. And maybe of the 4 items, the customer says, "Go ahead and do these 2, and then I'm going to hold off on these." Budgets play a factor in that. But if that's the case, that's fine. You get what you get that day. And this is probably the biggest thing that I try to teach technicians and writers. You get what you get that day. And then you've got to have a plan to loop them back in. So you do that through the active delivery. Hey, come see me when you come in to pick the vehicle up. Now you go, here's everything we got accomplished today. Here is that multi-point inspection that we talk about that I sent you earlier. Here's the items that got done. Here's the 2 things that you wanted to hold off on. So let's talk about looping you back in. What I'll do is I'll reach out to you in about a month or so. We'll talk about set up another time to get you back in. How does that work into your schedule?
Right.
That'd be great. Now, you want to have such a relationship that you're saying to them, look, at the last thing you need to do is have to remember these things on your car. That's my job. My job is to make you aware of things we still need to get accomplished on your vehicle, work in your budget, but it's my job to do that so that you don't have to. If you can build that kind of relationship with your customer, they don't have any problem with that phone call a month from now saying, "Hey, I just wanted to know if you wanted to go ahead and loop back in and get those done."
Right.
The dealers that are doing that are on 30 days out, are getting customers, about 30% will approve those additional needed services on that phone call. And then there's another 60, 70% that will say, "Ooh, not this month." And you say, "No problem. I'll reach out to you in another month or so." And by the way, the book talks about how incredibly simple it is to track those. But in 60 days out, there's another 10 or 20% that will say yes. So what you end up with, if there's a daily conversation of declined services with a customer and you're setting up a plan, 3 months out, 2 months out, you have customers coming in every day with sold work that goes back to that same technician. So now his level of quality of his MPI increases dramatically. Why? Because he sees the results of his labor, right? He's took the time to do a good quality inspection, and those are looping back in. The work's sold. I don't have to wait for an authorization.
Right.
And so I'm padding the technician's paychecks. I'm padding the service advisor's paychecks, and I'm getting this non-diagnostic quality production out of the service department that goes right to the net profits.
Absolutely. Yep. Comes right back to being proactive. I mean, that's just all about being proactive and following up with those customers on that work that really needs to be done on their car. Absolutely. I'm curious, your thoughts on, as part of that active delivery process, what are your thoughts on setting the next maintenance appointment for that customer before they leave the dealership from your current visit? Yeah, it's so easy. Now, what's interesting is, it wasn't that many years ago. You remember, Bill, you were in every 3 months or 4,000 miles for your oil change. And now with full synthetic oil, you're in once a year. Right. So it's extremely easy. As part of that active delivery is I'm going to go ahead and set this date next year. I do it with my doctor. I do it with my cardiologist. Yeah, your dentist. They're just going to pick that. You have no idea a year from now what's going on in your life, but you're perfectly fine taking that. What we get to do is have it in the system now. And so now the system will start to pick up on those reminders. You've got an upcoming appointment. But this idea of thinking that I don't want to lock in that appointment today, the pushback is almost nil. People, they may say, I have no idea what's going on a year from now. You go, you bet. And of course, when it's getting close, we'll remind you. And if there's a conflict, we'll change it. But this way, you're on the books, and they always say yes. So this active delivery, you may have a lot of support staff doing a lot of things, BDC, setting appointments, all those wonderful things. But as an advisor,
to build that relationship and that trust. If you're not actively talking to them at the end of that visit, I think then you're doing yourself a disservice, but more importantly, you're building up a lot more no's in your day-to-day routine instead of the yeses.
Yep. And it seems as if we in the industry and particularly parts and service directors have so much hand-wringing about customer retention. Are they going to return? Are they going to return? And being, again, proactive about asking that customer to set their appointment before they leave just makes perfect sense. And I think it's one of those areas that there's a heck of a lot of opportunity for dealers to improve their retention rates and improve their overall customer experience by doing more of that.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this all leads back to tech retention, right? It's
oh my gosh, yeah.
Right now, one of the main motivators for the book was the amount of movement I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years with technicians. And you say, well, if they have a good situation, why are they leaving? If the customer pay business isn't there, forget about the volume of cars. In fact, I will tell you, if there's a lot of just repair work going on where you're required to diagnose, it's tough to be 100% productive, 110% productive. And so when they're 80% productive, what do? They start focusing on their flat rate. And there's always going to be a dealer that's going to offer up some kind of bump to lure you out of a particular store. When you've got so much additional customer pay business that is looping back in from decline services, as well as presenting the MPI with a real engagement, talking to them, and getting more yeses. Now that technician's 140, 150% productive, and he never takes that phone call. He never takes the phone call with this idea of, I might get a higher flat rate, but do they have the amount of customer pay business coming in? I don't want to take that chance, so I just never take the phone call.
Right. Well, as we begin to wrap up here, Don, as you talk to dealers and work with dealers all over the country, what have been some of the challenges that you've seen service managers, service directors battling in, the last 3, 6 months, 12 months or so? Anything that you're seeing that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think when car sales start to slow down, there just naturally is more conversations about fixed operations. And so on the surface, a general manager is going to say, well, let's just spin this thing up. Let's spend a little bit more money on marketing. And if they already are struggling with some stress and some chaos in the drive, and now they're just adding more oil changes, you end up now losing a quality service advisor. It gets too chaotic, it's stressful. So what happens, the service manager has to jump in, right? So he becomes this great fireman. And so I probably see more stress this year from service managers just trying to elevate their game to drive in more dollars for the net profit for the dealership. And they're doing that by this incredible work ethic. I mean, they are going 100 miles an hour.
Yep.
What they really need to be doing is concentrating on a couple of the really important aspects that I list out in the book, and seeing what's happening in them. Is there a level of engagement with the writers? And that sets the tone for a very productive day if they've engaged with the customer and things of that nature. So a lot of pressure on service managers today. A lot of pressure on general managers today. And being a former general manager, I've had those conversations with the owners. And so I will say that pausing and really focusing on areas that are creating the chaos. What is it that's actually causing this chaoticness in my service driver in the shop? And say, okay, we got to work on fixing that, and then we'll be back to a level playing field, and I can actually manage and develop my staff. Does that answer that a little bit?
Absolutely. As a mentor of mine once told me, you got to spend the time working on the business and not in the business, and
there you go.
It's tough to do.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic, Don. Thanks for very much for sharing your expertise. So many ideas here, and I think you've certainly got my wheels spinning, and the wheels of our listeners spinning as well. A lot of good information there to think about. So Don, I know that you spend your time working with dealers across the country, and I know that you're open to a quick phone conversation with anybody who wants to pick your brain and learn a little bit more. And I believe you're happy to spend an hour with someone at no cost to them to help them out and see if you can help them improve their success rate further. So if somebody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Visit my website. All my contact information is on the website, which is sctconsulting.com. There's book information. I think the book is an easy read.
It is. Yes, it is.
Story format type thing, experiences, chapters move at a pretty good pace, but it puts you in a really good position to walk out in that drive and see exactly what's going on. But if you're a general manager, if you're an owner, if you're a service manager, and there's one particular facet that you're struggling with, you got a good team together, you're hitting the marks in a lot of areas, but you're struggling in one, call me. Call me. I'm more than happy to spend an hour with you walking through, if nothing else, some things to think about. Hey, you might want to take a look at this. You might want to think about taking this approach. And that may be all you need.
Yep.
And so more than happy to do that. I certainly take those calls on a regular basis and enjoy those conversations.
Absolutely. And I would encourage our listeners to take advantage of that. You'll get a heck of a lot from an hour spent with Don. I can assure you of that. If somebody wants to purchase your book, where's the best place to pick that up?
It's on Amazon. There's a hard copy. There is the paperback as well as the ebook. I've got to get an audio done. It's been out for about a month now, so I got to get the audio done, which is the way I would typically read a book. But Amazon's got that, and the website has got links, so you can click right on it. It goes right to Amazon.
Beautiful. And we'll include Don's contact information as well as where you can purchase his book in the show notes. So Don, appreciate your time and best of luck with everything, and especially with the book going forward. You have been listening to Retention Roadmap, Navigating Service Success for New Car Dealerships. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.